the top challenger to the Cowboys, as Jack alluded to here, the Philadelphia Eagles, who had a really good offseason. They always seem, at least the perception of the Philly off seasons are so often, okay, like they loaded up, and we said this before, it seems like they always do the obvious thing, whether that's in the draft or whether that's, trading for big time players. They're very star oriented in their moves, which to guys like us and the general fan, that's very attractive. Like when you go trade for AJ Brown, you're like, okay, like I like that move if I'm a Philly fan. It's easy to get behind that. So their key additions this offseason, they add Saquon Barkley, Cooper DeJean, and Quinyon Mitchell were their 2 draft picks, their first 2 cornerbacks. Again, guys who most people thought fell in the draft. They added Devin White, as Jack so articulately pointed out before we started the recording today, which Ziggy said does not matter. CJ Gardner-Johnson's back, Bryce Huff coming over from the Jets. And then a second straight year now where they've changed both their offensive and defensive coordinators. Kellen Moore comes over and Vic Fangio as well to lead the defense. Key losses, Jason Kelsey's gone, Hassan Reddick's gone, Fletcher Cox retired, DeAndre Swift is out, Kevin Byard's out. They extended AJ Brown and DeVonta Smith. Both of them got pretty massive deals, $32 million a year for AJ and $25 million for DeVonta. They also extended a couple linemen in Landon Dickerson and Jordan Mailata. So like this team has star power all over the place, guys. It's just a matter now. The key question we have for Philly, will we see an Eagles team that's closer? Do they resemble more of that Super Bowl team from 2 years ago or the team that fell apart last season? A lot of new faces, but which way, if you had to pick, will this team be more similar to?
I just did watch a movie called Silver Linings Playbook with Bradley Cooper.
Is that good?
And it was a good movie.
I never watched.
And they're big Eagles fans. He has a Deshaun Jackson jersey. So it got me hyped for football season.
Who's it, Jennifer Lawrence?
Yeah, Jennifer Lawrence is the co-star in that movie. But it's a good movie. But they're big Eagles fans, big Philly sports fans. So I was kind of hyped for the season.
You're in an Eagles mood.
I was in an Eagles mood, yeah. I mean, I'm gonna lean more so what we saw when they went to the Super Bowl. I mean, this Eagles team.
Bye.
I am gonna buy. This Eagles team collapsed very hard, and there's no denying that. They're one of the worst teams in football for the whole second half of the season. And even with that collapse, Hurts playing probably the worst he could have played. He was banged up, turning the ball over.
It was so bad.
So bad. Dallas going 8-0 at home, and the Eagles having that stretch. They finished 1 game behind Dallas in the NFC East. I think Dallas played probably the best they could have, and Philly probably played the worst that they could have. And there was a 1-game difference. And the main killer last year to Philly was in their defense. It was bad cornerback play from Darius Slay and
Bradbury.
And yeah, declined big time. Worse than we thought. Bad linebacker play. It was on the defensive side, along with Jalen Hurts turning the ball over. But now you go out and you get, like you said, Bryce Huff from the Jets. New faces, Devin White, who I think I know Ziggy said it doesn't matter. I think he's a good linebacker. Saquon Barkley. The offense has no issues.
I love the Barkley.
Like the offense really has no issues. If Jalen Hurts can just hold on to the ball. It's on the defensive side of the ball. You got 2 top 40 draft picks. No reason to think they're not going to pan out. A lot of new faces, but I'm going to lean that this is a team with just way too much talent on both ends to see a repeat of last year's collapse. Like, I'm going to say this team wins 11 or 12 games and looks good as opposed to looks mediocre and stumbles into the playoffs.
How about you, Ziggy?
I mean, Devin White really is. He's the story of this team. He's really talented. He put together a lot of good years. And then the 2023 season, he just had unbelievable mental error after unbelievable mental error and looked like one of the worst players in the entire NFL anytime he had to play run defense. On the other hand, though, the Eagles are hoping they can turn it around. And like Jack said, I do think there's some reason to be optimistic about that. You know, defensive performance in the NFL was up and down. It's not as consistent as fans think. I like some of the new faces they brought in. Bryce Huff fits in really well with the way the Eagles love to rotate defenders. Despite only playing, 40% of the snaps for the Jets last year, he had 10 sacks. So he'll fit in really well with that role. I like moving on from Hassan Reddick and putting him in. But it all comes down to one player. And that one player just is going to be Jalen Hurts. He has to be better. Now, the offense wasn't great around him. The coordinating wasn't great. There were a lot of problems there. But when you're a star quarterback with the deal he has for the Philadelphia Eagles, the responsibility is on you, especially when he's got all those weapons around him. Now, I know the offensive line got a little bit worse, but it should still be one of the better offensive lines in football. You've got Saquon coming in to juice up the run game. You've got maybe the best wide receiver duo in the NFL. He has to perform. And while I think he can, he's going to have to do a better job mentally than he did last year.
It's tough too. A lot of people haven't talked about Shane Steichen leaving. Shane Steichen took a Colts team that went 4-12-1, lost their rookie quarterback, and had Gardner Minshew leading the way. And we like Gardner Minshew's good, but yeah, there's a reason he's a backup. That team was a couple passes away from going to the playoffs. Shane Steichen has proven to be one of the better coaches in football. And Brian Johnson came in last year, and it was a lot, even from someone who's not watching Philly every single week. You could tell it's like, okay, they're just running like inside zone every single time. I was a DeAndre Swift fantasy owner, and I'm going, the play calling in Philly is like pretty, it's not really that creative, kind of lackluster. And
it's like Steelers.
And then it carried over throughout much of the season. So hopefully you're hoping that Kellen Moore can come in and spark that creativity that they had a couple of years ago, and you get that MVP Jalen Hurts back. I'm with you guys. I think there's just too much talent. The offensive side of the ball is phenomenal. Yeah, you're right. As long as Jalen Hurts holds on to the football, I think they'll be fine. But when you look at the defensive collapse, it was like, I mean, guys, it is just stunning what happened. They went from 2022 8th in points per game allowed, first in passing yards allowed, to 30th in points allowed last year, 31st in passing yards allowed. I mean, they legitimately went from arguably the best defense in football to the worst over the course of a season, and they still started off 10-1. It's just that, I mean, the end of season collapse is just crazy. I don't know if you guys saw, I was just looking at comparisons throughout the season, and the edge rushers. So here are just some numbers to support it that I thought were just shocking. In 2022, 38 sacks for their edge rushers. They started off last year through 9 games, 16 sacks, 4.5 through the final 8 games for all their edge rushers. Josh Sweat, 0 sacks the final 8 games. Hassan Reddick, 1 game with a sack from week 10 on. Jordan Davis had 0 sacks, 0 tackles for loss, 0 QB hits from the game 8 on. It was like everybody just fell off a cliff. And you kind of sit back and just go like something must have happened in that locker room. I don't know what it was, but there was something bizarre must have gone on, because these are really good football players, and all of them at the same time. It seemed like they just lost faith in their team. I mean, they got blown out by the 49ers and Dallas in back-to-back games. They're the first team ever to lose back-to-back 20-point games after going to a Super Bowl the year before. Like, I think there's some story from the 2023 Philadelphia Eagles that maybe hasn't come to light, where I don't know. It was just bizarre to see such a good team fall that far from grace.
Maybe they're betting against themselves.
I mean, maybe they it was so bad that maybe they were.
I mean, you call up a friend, call up a relative, a few grand on Dallas, San Francisco.
Through week 10, number 1 versus the run, 66 yards per game allowed. The next 7 games, 31st in the NFL.
Sus.
80 more yards per game. Like, I don't understand. It wasn't like they got ravaged by injuries the way the Dolphins did.
I mean, it's also too, it's like the talent that team had, and to end their season losing by 30 to the Bucs in the playoffs, it was just outrageous.
My dad bet on the Eagles to beat the Bucs, and I was talking to him about this show, and he went, "Man, what a sucker bet that was."
Like, I was all over the Bucs in that game.
Yeah, I mean, the Eagles, they weren't as good as the team that went 10-1. They weren't as bad as the team that had that end of season collapse. So the key this year, I think, is we're talking about that huge up and that huge down, and the way they felt so swingy emotionally. They're just going to have to play steady. And if they play steady with this schedule, we've got them second in the division, but they can easily win.
Oh, they can easily win the Super Bowl. I mean, we said on the show the expectations for Philly should still be Super Bowl. But yeah, those first 11 games, it did feel like they were escaping. If you go back in hindsight, they were escaping games more than they were winning them. And
we said that on the show, and people said it was not a fluke. They were an elite team. We were being super haters.
Yeah, so they just got to pull it together, because the talent is there. Defense has to step up, and I think with all the additions, they did bring in some younger guys. Like, that secondary could be really good if it all clicks, if it all gels, and by mid-season, you see DeJean and Mitchell come into their own.
That's 2 first-round caliber corners they got in the first.
Yeah, and Huff's a younger guy than Reddick. Like, so there is some. I mean, Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis. It's a matter of them lasting throughout the season. As we just said, they fell off cliffs, but a lot of young talent on that defense. While there is still a veteran presence, I think they'll be fine. But it was just shocking going through it. And Nick Sirianni, there's even questions about how good of a coach he is.